We are less than a month away from college football on the field. Until we get there, we're going to rank the top players in every conference in the Power Five, and we stop at the ACC at a very talented position at wide receiver, and we bring in Dan Rubin of BC Interruption and also Ryan Kantor of Shakinthesouthland to help us out here. So, Ryan, let's start with you. Would love to hear your list, top 5 in the ACC at wideout.
Okay, so barely missing the cut is Travis Rudolph at Florida State. I thought he was, I debated him, but at number 5 I went with Isaiah Ford at Virginia Tech. You got to keep in mind just how terrible that offense was last year, and yet he was still very good. He's a rising sophomore. He was a 4-star out of Jacksonville who could have went to Florida State or Florida or Clemson, but he chose to go to Virginia Tech. That probably handicapped his numbers a little bit. But as a true freshman, 56 receptions, 709 yards, 6 touchdowns, very impressive numbers, which I would expect to only improve. Number 4, Ryan Switzer at UNC. He's a rising junior. He was a superstar punt returner earlier in his career, and he's still phenomenal there. But last year, he really broke out as a true wide receiver. 93 receptions, 1,098 yards, and 7 TDs. Extremely explosive. He'll get you on the tunnel screen. He can burn you deep. He's got great speed, great agility. Very impressive wide receiver. One of the better players UNC has. Number 3, Artavis Scott from wide receiver U. He's from Clemson. He's a sophomore, extremely explosive. He's kind of a smaller, more diminutive guy. He'll burn you in the screen game. He's kind of like a Percy Harvin, Darren Sproles even. He played some out of the Wildcat against South Carolina. He's just a real playmaker. You want to just get him the ball any way you can. Obviously, he's a better player when Deshaun Watson's in the game. But last year, as a freshman, 76 receptions, 965 yards, 8 TDs. If Watson's healthy all year, those numbers will get even better. Mike Williams, the true number 1 receiver for Clemson, comes in at my number 2 best receiver in the conference. So they have number 2 and number 3. Mike Williams is a junior. He had 77 receptions. He had 1,346 yards, which is the most of anyone on the list so far. He had 9 touchdowns, also the most of anyone on the list so far. Incredibly talented. He really suffered when Cole Stout was the starter and Watson was out because he's a great vertical and red zone threat that was really underplayed without Watson and with someone who can't really attack deep. So if Watson stays healthy all year, I would expect his numbers to improve even more. And honestly, I'd probably expect him to be a fairly high draft pick, and he could potentially leave as a junior. He's that good. So, although they have the second and third best and probably the best core receivers in the conference and maybe the country, number 1 does not go to Clemson. It goes to Pittsburgh wide receiver Tyler Boyd. His numbers are just off the page, just crazy numbers. 163 receptions, far more than anybody on the list. 2,435 yards and 15 touchdowns. Just a true superstar, Larry Fitzgerald type star receiver for Pittsburgh. He had 6 different games with 100-plus yards. He had a pretty bad drop against Houston in the bowl game that ended up costing them the game, but even in that game he had 100-plus yards. He's by miles the best offensive player they have, and without him, I don't know how good that Pittsburgh team would be. So 2 from Clemson, but number 1 goes to Tyler Boyd.
Okay, that top 5 looks pretty familiar. Well, what's not familiar is Clemson being wide receiver U, but that's another conversation. But all right, Dan, let's hear your top 5 at wide receiver, and no BC players allowed.
Well, let me tell you, if you want to talk about wide receiver U, Boston College is 100% absolutely not the place you're going to go at all. I don't think we've seen a wide receiver in 2 years. And if we have, it's been a converted quarterback who's playing H-back, which we may have another one coming in this year. I'm so excited. We're going to have our converted quarterback to play tight end. This is fantastic. So no Boston College receivers made my list. Travis Rudolph, I did also leave off of my board from Florida State. I'm really interested to see how he does this year. I think chemistry is a big thing between receivers to quarterbacks, and within a couple of games, we'll know right off the bat if Rudolph has developed chemistry with either Sean McGuire or Everett Golson. I'm assuming it's going to be Golson, which means that if Rudolph can develop as the guy, he's going to get a lot of targets. But I still left him off of my top 5. Number 5, I actually went a little bit off the board. I went to Braxton Berrios from the U down there at Miami. He did not have that many catches last year. As a freshman, he only had between, I think, 20 and 25 catches. But here's where I'm coming from. I think with the quarterback that he has in Brad Kaya, I think that he's going to be developing into a fantastic receiver. He's undersized. He's only 5'9", but he was an Under Armour All-American coming out of high school. He was not the top receiver on the field for Kaya as a freshman, but these are guys who were recruited together. They've played together now for a year. I think every quarterback needs that type of security blanket type receiver, and he's going to be an unheralded guy, but I'm really high on him this year, especially if Miami's offense can really put together something special down there. I think they have the tools. Whether or not they do it is a totally different thing, at least in the passing game. Number 4, I agree. You're not going to hear much out of me that's going to be really different from here. Ryan Switzer from North Carolina. Explosive speed, explosive game-changing ability. I have him at number 4. Number 3, I went with Artavis Scott from Clemson. You get the 1,000 yards, a freshman All-American selection, game-breaking ability, and can take the top off the defense, and he's not even the best receiver on the field. So if you guys want to send him to Boston College for any reason whatsoever, I am all for that. I don't even mind if he sits out the year as a transfer. I'm perfectly okay with it. But if he wants to be the number 1 receiver, I can guarantee I think I know a team that might have him. Anyways, my number two guy is Mike Williams from Clemson. There's a guy. So anytime you have a guy who's 6'4", you can just throw it up there. And for me, as a professional New England Patriots fan, I think of the guys who ate the Patriots alive for the New York Giants, the Mario Manninghams, the Plaxico Burrses of the world, and you think about them in the red zone as being such huge targets against undersized cornerbacks. That's game-changing ability. That's game-breaking ability. He can go deep. He can do it all, and he might be the best receiver in the ACC, except for Tyler Boyd. Number 1, Tyler Boyd runs a sub-4.5 40. He's the best out there. I mean, he is the man. I got a good look at him last year against Boston College, and when you think about what Pittsburgh has already on offense with Kantor at running back, that's going to open up some great options in the passing game. You have to take account of where Boyd is at all times, whether it's an end around, whether it's an option type pass, or whether it's a spread type pass. He's going to be the number 1 target, and rightfully so, because he is one heck of a receiver, and that's why I have him at number 1.
Well, guys, I think there is no question the talent and ability at the top end of these lists, but I got to kind of question the depth in the conference when the number 1, 2, and 3 guys are that distinguished, and maybe even 4 and 5, but definitely the top 3 are that distinguished. So I'll run them down here very quickly because I've got Ryan Switzer at 5, great in the return game as well, very impressed with his game against Georgia Tech last season when North Carolina had the highlight of their campaign, pulling off an upset against the Yellow Jackets. He caught 9 for $136 and 2 touchdowns. Number 4, I got Travis Rudolph as just a freshman, missing the first 3 games of the season. Still came back to catch 38, 4 touchdowns as a freshman. And again, Everett Golson probably in place at Florida State. We shall see how they develop any kind of rapport. He will probably be the number 1 threat for the Seminoles. At number 3, Artavis Scott. Exceptional after the catch, one of the more dangerous guys with his hands on the football in college football, even just as a freshman. I expect him to explode after being the 5th rated receiver in the ACC in regards to receiving yards just as a freshman, and really came on down the stretch. $185 against South Carolina and $114 against Oklahoma, so look out in 2015. Number 2, you guys talked about Mike Williams, exceptional hands, big physical receiver. Check out the orange and white game. I know Ryan knows what I'm talking about. Had a great one-handed catch in that one, even though it didn't count. Mike Williams over 1,000 yards for Clemson, despite the issues that they had at quarterback and not keeping Deshaun Watson on the field last season. Number 1, Tyler Boyd. What really distinguishes Tyler Boyd is the run-first philosophy at Pitt with James Conner at running back. They ran the ball exactly twice as many times as they passed it last year. Their number 2 receiver at tight end caught 21 passes while Boyd caught 78, so he was the target. And coming back, they have all of, get this, their number 2 returning receiver, 20-some receiving yards last year. So it's all Tyler Boyd. Boyd or nothing. Actually, he's going to be suspended for the first game of Pitt's season against Youngstown State for a DUI. But Tyler Boyd, the NFL scouts are drooling about him, and also wide receiver U with Artavis Scott in a few years coming out, and Mike Williams as well. All right, nice discussion there, guys.
And I misspoke.
Ryan, jump in for us.
And I misspoke. The stats I read for Tyler Boyd were his career stats. You're absolutely correct. 78 receptions, 1,261 yards, 8 touchdowns.
Yeah, so again, in an offense that doesn't do him a lot of favors, he is the marked man and still catches the football in double coverage. The Clemson duo is phenomenal. Ryan makes a point for best in the country. That argument is certainly in place. They are definitely in the conversation. Good stuff from the ACC at wide receiver. These are the guys that are freak athletes that are fun to watch, that make the game really exciting and make the plays that change games, and we should look forward to it this season. All right, Dan Rubin, BC Interruption, and also Ryan at Kantor of Shakinthesouthland, breaking down the top 5 in the ACC at wide receiver. Thanks, gentlemen.